We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, youth coaches, youth parents, youth players. Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass, where we're trying to take an advanced approach to simplifying how we go about coaching the game so we can maximize the results that our players have. Our motto is not more, it's better, better, better. How can we get better? How can we improve upon all the stuff that's come before us in the game of baseball, from coaches, players, people involved in the game? What parts can we just make carbon copies of and use? What parts can we borrow but improve upon, which is typically the main way of going about things, in my opinion, if we want to be the best coaches, parents, players? And also, what are some things that have not been discussed? What are some new ideas? What are some new things that are just flat out better than what's out there and what's come before? We're not trying to be different just to be different. We're just trying to be the best that we can be. And if different's a byproduct of that, so be it. This is the first solo episode of a happy 2025, a happy new year. Hope everything's going well for you to start the year. In today's episode, we have two parts that include a discussion about technology that I think are important for us to talk about. And third part of today's episode, we will talk about a baseball team that's out there. There's a lot of people talking about this team and a certain part of this team or certain players on this team. And I want to shine a light on something that I think is getting overlooked with regard to the impact certain players, certain areas of the organization have on their success. So we'll hit that in part 3. So let's dive into it. I saw a post on X a few weeks ago, and there was a coach who said, quote, "Hitters, put away the hit tracks and just hit. Please, eyewash." So the coach is saying, put away the hit tracks, put away the technology, and just hit, and then referred to it as eyewash. We got to be careful here. And you hear the introduction to the podcast, it says, using the best of the new school, blending it with the best of the old school. You cannot be partisan on this. If you are partisan, whether it's old school, new school, if you're anti-technology or pro-technology, if you are partisan, I am telling you, you are going to be missing the boat when it comes to optimal coaching strategies. Now, a side note on this, if they're partially in, partially out, they could say, you don't always need to hit tracks out, or focus more on hitting and a little less on the technology component of hitting, checking the screen, looking at the results of launch angles, exit velo, flight distance, etc. So I think it's important that we're not all in or all out on technology. And hit tracks, as many of you know, is essentially instant feedback for hitters. It gamifies hitting, tells them how hard they hit the ball, how far they hit the ball, the angle of the ball off the bat, and other things. I really like that kind of technology. With that said, when the hitter's out there in the game, they're not going to have that big screen next to them. They're not going to have the iPad next to them. They have to feel it out in game time. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have some of these nice tools, these informative tools. You could even call them motivational tools that get kids, one, wanting to hit more often because it's more fun, it's gamified, it's quantified, it's almost like a video game. And two, giving them quick feedback, say on their launch angle. They might think they hit the ball really well, but it was 35-degree launch angle, and you're like, hey guys, we want to hit line drives. We want to really pound that 15-degree launch angle. Now, a funny rebuttal to the X post by this coach, another coach rebutted saying, let's just ban stopwatches and rulers too while we're at it. Now, I will say this. I think this coach could have clarified their message a little bit when they said, hitters, put away the hit tracks and just hit. Please, eyewash. They could have clarified that a little bit more. If their message was a little more nuanced, they could have thrown in some context. Hitters, don't rely on the hit tracks during every batting practice. You got to spend time feeling it out just like you would in a game. They could also add something like hitting without a hit tracks can be just as valuable. The part I don't like is when it says eyewash at the end. And that's one of the benefits of watching baseball for 35 plus years and watching it closely. I mentioned before I was scorekeeping at Dodger games at 5 years old. So in the mid 80s. And you got to trust me here that my experience is saying, hey, technology is good, but it's not the end all be all. I venture to guess this is a young coach who doesn't have a lot of experience or has, say, 10 or less years of experience. Or maybe they're just regurgitating a message they've heard from some other coaches and not really clearly thinking about this from different angles. Technology is super beneficial, but we can't just rely on that. There are some baseball organizations, not professional, but the travel ball world or in the youth world, that put 100% of their faith in technology and think it's going to change everything about the game. And that's just not true. Unless the game becomes some virtual activity, there will always be the physical and a human element that takes place out there. So I saw that and I want to share it. And part of this podcast is trying to vet some of these bigger items, these more common messages that you're going to hear and that you probably have heard. So what I'm trying to do is vet them for you so you don't have to spend 30 years in baseball to accurately vet these things, because most of you listening are going to be coaching baseball or have kids that play baseball for 10 years, maybe 15 years, maybe 5 years. You're not even going to get to that 30-year mark of experience, 35-year mark of experience. And what I'm trying to do is take that experience and share with you that watch out for these coaches, watch out for these messages of all in or all out on technology. Now, speaking of technology, Jayden Daniels, for those of you that follow football, you know who he is. Rookie of the Year, NFL quarterback for the Commanders. He's one win away from going to the Super Bowl as a rookie. And I'm not sure how many of you knew this, but Jayden Daniels, this is according to a post on x.com by Todd Jacob, at the Todd Jacob. Jayden Daniels made virtual reality training a condition for any team drafting him. So Jayden Daniels made it a condition, a requirement that any team drafting him not only had to use VR, but it sounds like had to prioritize VR training, make it accessible, spend the money on it, allow him to use it, allow him to do it. Now, if you don't know Jayden Daniels and you're thinking, this is some kid just being demanding and a prima donna, that's not the kind of kid this guy comes across as. This kid seems like a really nice kid. He seems like a really nice kid. He doesn't seem like that kind of person. He doesn't seem like a demanding person. He seems like a really nice kid. So when I see this, I'm led to believe that he actually truly believes that this is very beneficial to him. Now, the reason I bring this up is those of you that have been listening to this podcast for a long time, you remember those episodes that I have brought up virtual reality. I said, this is going to change the game when it comes to hitting. And I said, do whatever you can to get your hands on some virtual reality for hitting specifically. I think base running is going to be a big one for those levels that you can steal bases. But at the end of the day, for baseball, it's going to be hitting. Virtual reality for hitting, that's really the big thing for baseball. Just getting a ton of reps that are literally game-like. Now, virtual reality has a ways to go to replicate exact game conditions. Here's an interesting thing about Jayden Daniels. He trains with this VR, and from what I understand, he puts the headset on and he can see the stadium just like it would appear come game time. So the stadium looks identical. Everything's in the right spot. It sounds like what he sees is an exact replica of what he's going to see come game time. Not only that, they plug in the opponent's blitz rates, the types of blitz, the types of fronts they use, the types of coverage they use, how often they use like cover 0 or a 2 or 3 deep, or how often they blitz their corner or blitz their Mike backer or their Sam or their Will backer. So they plug all that information in. And so he gets hundreds of extra reps, not off the scout team, which no matter how good the scout team does, it's not going to replicate the other team exactly. So he gets these exact reps, but here's the kicker on this. Do you know what speed he trains at? This is what really interested me here. He trains at 1.75x speed. So he trains on VR at almost 2 times game speed. That's incredible because the NFL is already like out of this world fast. I don't think the average NFL viewer understands how fast those cats are moving out there on the field. And part of the reason is because almost every up close or close shot of the game is a slow motion shot. And the slow motion makes it look like to the average viewer that those guys are actually slower than the average viewer. If you put that at game speed, full speed up close, or if you just stuck the average viewer right in the middle of a play, I think their mind would be boggled at how fast that game moves, how fast these guys are. I think the same thing about a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, right? You get in the batter's box, it's like, whoa. It's one thing to see it on a camera, because the camera, this is something interesting about a camera view when you're watching a game for baseball or watching the game from, say, the second row behind home plate. Hitters lose track of that ball the last 5 to 10 feet before it gets to home plate. Hitters lose it. They can't track it that fast. The eyes can't track the ball that fast. But if we're watching it from way back or from a camera, we can see it all the way to the catcher's glove. So we get this extended view. We get this extended time of seeing the pitch that the hitter didn't get. So we're like, man, why did he not swing at that? Or what? Well, he just got 20% less time to see that pitch. They got 15% less time to see that pitch. That's a big difference when you're talking about hundreds of seconds. So Jayden Daniels trains on VR at 1.75x speed. Now, I don't know if he does that every rep. I'm sure he doesn't do it every rep, but interesting. He trains his brain at 1.75x speed. In other words, on VR, he just speeds up the defense. Wouldn't that make the game go slow motion? This is the same thing that I preach about practice. We can tell our players to slow the game down. Hey, we got to slow it down out there. We got to slow the game down. You want to know what's eyewash, in my opinion? You truly slow the game down. You make practice faster. You train faster. Now, not every rep and not the entire drill or the entire practice, but you need to get a lot of reps that are faster than the game, with the caveat that you're not adding any unnecessary risk. And there are many ways to do this. I've been on here for a long time talking about how you have to speed up practice. You have to go faster in practice. Are you going to make more errors? Yes. We want our teams to make more errors in practice than they do in the game. Per ground ball. So the error rate in practice should be higher than the game on average. The error rate in practice, or the swing and miss rate, should be higher in practice than it is in the game. The error rate for our infielders, for our outfielders, should be higher in practice. The errant throw rate, on average, should be higher in practice than it is in the game. We should be challenging them. Now, it shouldn't just be a bad news bears situation come practice time. I'm not saying that. And there should definitely be success in practice. But you can't be afraid to speed up practice. We're afraid to speed up practice to make it more challenging. We are saying no to slowing down the game. Can't have both. Can't slow down the game without speeding up practice. They go together. They're not mutually exclusive. Now, you might get those few kids that can zone in and get in the zone like Steph Curry in the Olympics. Sure. But that's like lightning in a bottle. And you're probably not going to have a lot of kids that do that consistently. So speed up practice. So Jayden Daniels trains at 1.75x speed. And when you watch him play, you're like, he doesn't play like a rookie. It's like the game's slower to this rookie. You watch Caleb Williams for the Bears and the game looks fast. I'll give Caleb some slack. They had a terrible offensive line. That offensive line was terrible there. And I think you got to factor that in. But I don't want to get too far into the football stuff, although talking football is always fun, especially this time of year with the championship games coming up. So my message here, using this Jayden Daniels example that I just read about 2 days ago, if you want to slow down the game, you have to speed up practice. Now with baseballs and baseball bats, you got to be careful with this, and it can be done, but you just have to be careful with it. Baseball bats and baseballs, real baseballs, can do a lot of damage. So there's a lot of upfront stipulations, rules, clarity on safety concerns and the procedures, but you got to play fast. And that's why I'm a big fan of having soft foam, like foam core balls, softer balls, Incrediballs, tennis balls, wiffle balls. Make practice faster, make it harder as often as you can. Not the full time, and maybe not even half the time, but as much as you can. If you can make practice faster than the game half of the time, I think you're doing an awesome job. That should be the ideal goal midway through the season or the second half of the season for any coach. 50% of practice or more should be harder than the game. It should be faster than the game. All right, now, part 3 here. It's been about a month. We haven't talked about the Dodgers, so got to bring it up. Now, stay with me here. The Dodgers have signed some of these bigger names. We talked about this. We talked about this a while back when Ohtani signed with the Dodgers, that they're now going to have the inside track to the Japanese players coming out, and there's quite a few good ones coming out. But I think the average fan needs to be careful, and I'm going to tie this into how we should build our teams and how we should be careful to not just focus on the superstar. So the Ohtanis, the Blake Snell, the newest addition, Sasaki, these are the bigger marquee names. But I think it's important that we step back and say, did the Dodgers win the World Series last year as the best team on the planet just because they had these marquee names, these superstars? It'd be an easy argument to say that Tommy Edman was their best offensive player in the playoffs. Tommy Edman, a utility player. How many of you know that Blake Snell signed with the Dodgers? How many of you know the newest Japanese pitcher, Sasaki, signed with the Dodgers? How many of you know that Tommy Edman signed a big extension with the Dodgers this offseason? That didn't really make the news. That didn't really make the front page. But I think that signing is just as important as these other signings. You have a kid who hustles. He's a great kid who can play all these spots, who plays big in the big games, and the price per season, really great for what he brings to the team. And so this is my message. When we're building teams and you're building out your team, you're picking your players, it's natural for us to key in on the elite talent players, the studs, the bigger name kids in your area. You win championships just as much with role players as you do with elite stud all-stars. I'm not saying you shouldn't have the all-stars on your team if you can get them and they're good kids. They work hard, they're coachable. but it's going to be the back end of that draft or the back end of your team building that's just as likely to help lead your team to the championship. So the Dodgers role players, you think about all these journeymen like Max Muncy got kicked to the curb. He literally got released by the A's. The Oakland A's didn't even want him. They didn't trade him away. I know Billy Beane trades guys away and gets some pretty good talent back. Billy Beane didn't even want him. They dropped him. They released him. And the Dodgers picked him up. Max Muncy's a heck of a ball player. Chris Taylor hasn't been amazing, but he's been a really good role player for the Dodgers over the last few seasons. They didn't want him. I think it was Seattle. They didn't want him. Tommy Edman, the Dodgers signed him like a 6-year extension for like $72 million. In today's baseball world, that's like peanuts. That's essentially saying not that many teams want him. If he's willing to sign a contract that's saying that he's not that valued. Blake Trinan, one of their main relievers, a journeyman. You could go on and on. They had so many guys. Their bullpen was literally a bunch of guys that nobody else wanted. So when we're building our team and we're thinking, how do we build this winning team? It starts with coachable players, high hustle players. And then from there, it's about getting quality players across the board, especially those that aren't the marquee names in your area, the super talented all-star kids. Those kids, great. It's nice to have them. And definitely in Little League, it's nice to have an arm like that or two. I get it. Or a catcher that's a stud. But it's just as important and maybe more important to get those role players right. And that's why it's so important, I think, to get coachable players, high hustle players. Because then you can coach up those role players. And we call them role players, but really every player has a role, quote unquote. So I just wanted to shine a light on that. I wanted to use the comparison to the Dodgers that everybody can see and kind of tie it into what we can do at our level. You look at like Michael Conforto. That didn't make any of the news. How many of you knew Michael Conforto signed with the Dodgers? That guy's going to be a big help for the Dodgers. He's going to find himself having a great role, in my opinion, for the Dodgers. They just signed a stud left-handed pitcher, bullpen guy. But most people wouldn't even know his name. He's a bullpen arm. He's not one of those famous closers or well-known closers. They just signed him. So think of optimizing your team, not so much just in that top tier, but if anything, maybe more at that third and fourth tier talent level. But you see things that maybe other coaches are overlooking. Maybe you see some grit. Maybe you see a chip on the shoulder, which isn't that common at the youth baseball age. I think chip on the shoulder is much easier to see when kids are in college. You can see that chip when they're older. But look at those kids that might be getting overlooked, that you think because they work hard, they hustle, they're coachable, they have good attitudes, that you can find a role for them that can really lift up the team. So the Dodgers make the news for signing these marquee names, the big names, the MVPs, but I think their success is just as much related to finding those role players that those outside of Dodger fans probably wouldn't even be able to tell you their names, much less their ERA, fielding percentage, OPS, etc. So it's great to be back here, starting into our 6th year of the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. 2025 is going to be awesome. Baseball season is not that far away. Always good to be back here. And speaking of being back, next week, we'll be back next Tuesday, as always, with a new episode. And we're going to start a 2-part series next week. We'll do part 1 next week and part 2 the following week that talks about how to maximize and optimize indoor training, especially in tight places. I think that's super useful information, strategies, tips that we can use right now. And in 3 weeks, we'll have the top 5 coaching X posts of the month and some other good stuff. So this year is going to be good. A lot of new information we're going to talk about here. We're going to keep iterating, keep getting better. We'll try our best to tie it into the new things that we're seeing out there in the baseball world. And I hope you all have a great week. And until next week, let's take care of our health so we can take care of our families and be there for our close friends. And let's take this information out there and put it into play. All right, everyone, y'all take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.